The December snowstorm had turned Denver International Airport into a world of white chaos, where secrets hid beneath layers of ice and innocence. Oh, inside, Christmas lights twinkled against the glass walls while travelers rushed toward their gates, unaware that everything was about to change. The German shepherd's bark shattered the peaceful hum like breaking glass. Duke lunged forward, his massive body straining against the leash, barking with a desperation Officer William Harrison had never witnessed in 6 years of partnership. The target of his fury stood frozen near the security checkpoint, a young pregnant woman clutching her swollen belly, tears streaming down her pale face. "Please make him stop," she cried out, her voice breaking with terror. Passengers gasped and pulled back. Security guards rushed forward. Phones began recording. William's weathered hands struggled to restrain his partner, his instincts screaming that something was terribly, impossibly wrong. What Duke had discovered would expose a darkness no one could have imagined. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching. From now, let's continue with the story. The morning of December 20th had begun like any other at Denver International Airport. The temperature outside hovered at -10 degrees Celsius. The blizzard intensifying with each passing hour, turning the runways into rivers of white. Inside the massive terminal, warmth and light created an illusion of safety. Christmas music drifted through speakers, competing with the mechanical hum of conveyor belts and the constant shuffle of thousands of travelers making their way through the holiday rush. Officer William Harrison moved through the codes with the quiet precision of a man who had spent 2 decades reading danger in faces and body language. At 58, his steel-gray hair and weathered features told stories of battles fought in distant deserts and daily struggles closer to home. The airport security uniform sat stiffly on his military straight posture, a row of veteran pins glinting under the fluorescent lights. His eyes, tired but perpetually vigilant, scanned each passing traveler with trained efficiency. Beneath his uniform jacket, worn against regulation, was his old military vest from Afghanistan. He could never bring himself to remove it, though he could not have explained why. The faint brown stains on the fabric had long since faded, but he knew they were there. Some memories marked you in ways soap and water could never reach. A slight tremor ran through his hands as he adjusted his grip on Duke's leash. The medication helped with the nightmares, but mornings were still difficult. 2 years had passed since Elizabeth's funeral, yet the ghost of his wife still walked beside him through these crowded halls. The wedding ring he once wore now hung from a chain around his neck, hidden beneath his shirt, resting against his heart like a talisman against forgetting. Duke paced beside him, 6 years old and in the prime of his working life. The German shepherd's dark sable coat gleamed under the terminal lights, his amber eyes alert to every movement, every scent. The service vest marked him as official, the tag, reading tool, catching the light as he moved. William had never questioned the number when the K-9 training facility assigned Duke to him. It seemed as random as any other identification code. But there was nothing random about the bond between them. Duke had been with William through the darkest period of his life. The long months after Elizabeth's death, when getting out of bed felt like climbing mountains. The dog's steady presence His unconditional devotion had become the lifeline that kept William tethered to a world that often felt too heavy to bear. This morning, like every morning, they walked their patrol route together, William checking his watch more frequently than he once had, counting down the months until retirement. Duke moving with the confident grace of a working dog who had never failed a mission. Neither of them knew that everything was about to change. Neither of them knew that the woman approaching the security checkpoint carried a secret that would connect them to ghosts they thought long buried. The digital clock above Gate C read 9:47 a.m. when the morning routine shattered. William had been considering a coffee break, mentally calculating whether he had time before the next security briefing. Duke walked beside him with the calm professionalism that had become second nature, nose lowered, taking in the thousands of scents that painted an invisible map of the terminal. Families clustered around departure screens. Business travelers clutched their coffee cups like lifelines, and tourists posed for selfies against the backdrop of snow-covered runways visible through the massive windows. Everything appeared normal, peaceful even, despite the growing storm outside. Then, Duke stopped. It was not the gradual pause of a dog catching an interesting scent. It was an abrupt, total halt, as if he had walked into an invisible wall. His head lifted sharply, nostrils flaring once, twice, again. The muscles along his shoulders tensed, transforming his posture from relaxed companion to coiled weapon in the space of a heartbeat. William felt the change through the leash before he saw it. "What is it, partner?" he murmured, his voice carrying the gentle authority of long familiarity. Duke's ears locked forward, his amber eyes fixing on something in the middle distance. A low grunt rumbled from his chest, then he seemed to relax slightly. His tail gave a small wag. William exhaled, allowing himself a quiet chuckle. "Keeping me on edge, huh?" He had learned long ago that Duke sometimes reacted to things invisible to human senses, phantom threats that dissolved upon closer inspection. In an airport, there were a million scents to sort through, a million false alarms waiting to happen. But his smile faded as he followed Duke's gaze. The woman entered through the glass doors with a presence that somehow stood apart from the flowing crowds. Tall, early 30s, with light brown hair cascading over the shoulders of a navy blue coat. Dark jeans hugged her legs, and a white blouse stretched over what appeared to be an 8-month pregnancy. She carried 2 brown paper shopping bags, their handles gripped so tightly her knuckles showed white even from a distance. Sunglasses obscured her eyes despite the indoor lighting. William tracked her movement with the subconscious attention of a trained observer. Something was off. Most travelers moved with purpose or confusion, glancing at signs, checking phones, hurrying toward gates or security lines. This woman moved differently. Each step seemed measured, deliberate, as though she had rehearsed the exact path she would take. Her lips pressed together in a thin line, her chest rising and falling in controlled, careful breaths. Duke's reaction intensified. His head lifted higher, nostrils working the air like bellows. His body went rigid, every muscle suddenly taut. William stopped walking, his hand tightening instinctively on the leash. "Easy, Rex," he said quietly, giving a gentle tug. The dog did not budge. His ears remained pinned forward, his focus absolute. Years of training had taught Duke to alert on explosives, narcotics, dozens of dangerous substances. But William had never seen this particular quality of attention, this laser-like intensity that seemed to burn from his partner's eyes. The woman approached the security checkpoint, her movements maintaining that strange, rehearsed quality. She adjusted her coat with trembling fingers. When she reached for her boarding pass to hand to the gate officer, William caught the faint tremor running through her hands. Duke gave a low growl. It was quiet, restrained, but unmistakable to anyone who knew him. The sound vibrated through the leash into William's palm like an electric current. His heartbeat quickened. In 4 years of partnership, Duke had never been wrong. Explosives hidden in luggage, narcotics concealed in body cavities. Once, a man carrying accelerants, planning to set fire to a cargo hold. Every alert had been justified, every instinct validated. But this woman looked harmless, vulnerable, even pregnant and frightened. Clutching shopping bags filled with what appeared to be baby supplies, visible through the gap in the paper. William's professional instincts warred with his eyes. Trust the dog, or trust what he could see. Then Duke barked. The sound cut through the terminal's ambient noise like a knife through silk. Sharp, explosive, commanding, heads turned in an instant ripple of attention. The woman froze mid-motion, her boarding pass halfway to the officer's outstretched hand. Her face drained of color under the harsh overhead lights, lips parting in shock. Her grip on the shopping bags tightened until William could see the paper beginning to tear. All around them, passengers stopped mid-conversation. Parents pulled children closer. Someone's phone clattered to the floor, forgotten. The carefully maintained order of the security checkpoint wavered, uncertainty spreading through the crowd like blood in water. The woman's voice broke the silence. "Please make him stop." The words came out high and thin, terror bleeding through every syllable. One hand moved instinctively to her rounded belly, while the other rose in a defensive gesture. The shopping bags swung against her legs, rustling. William gave the command firmly but calmly. Rex, heel, Duke did not obey. In 6 years together, through countless training sessions and real-world deployments, the dog had never once failed to respond to that command. Now he lunged forward, muscles coiling beneath his dark coat. The leash went taut in William's grip, his boots sliding slightly on the polished terminal floor as he fought to maintain control. Duke's barking grew frantic, not the aggressive snarl of a dog preparing to attack, but something else, something desperate, as though he were trying to communicate an urgent warning in the only language available to him. 2 security officers materialized from their stations, moving quickly toward the disturbance. "Step away from the gate," one shouted, hands raised in a calming gesture directed at the growing crowd. Passengers stumbled backward, clutching luggage and children, pressing away from the scene. Conversations died mid-word. The Christmas music continued its cheerful loop, creating a surreal contrast to the tension crackling through the air. The woman shook her head violently, tears spilling from beneath her sunglasses. "I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice cracked with genuine fear or perfect acting. William could not tell which. "I just want to board my flight." Duke's barking continued, each bark sharper and more insistent than the last. His claws scrabbled against the floor, seeking purchase. He pulled so hard the leash nearly slipped from William's weathered hands. William crouched slightly, his eyes scanning every detail. The way she clutched her belly, protective but somehow wrong. The metallic sound that rang out when one of the shopping bags brushed against her knee. The perfect roundness of her pregnant stomach, lacking the natural asymmetry he had seen in Elizabeth during her pregnancy years ago. Something clicked in his mind, an instinct crystallizing into certainty. He turned to the nearest officer. "We need to check her." His voice carried the flat authority of absolute conviction. "Now!" The woman's eyes widened behind her sunglasses. "No, you can't." Panic flashed across her features. "I'm pregnant." She took a step backward, then another. Duke barked again, louder this time. The sound was almost anguished. He lunged forward with such force that William had to brace his legs to avoid being pulled off balance. The dog stopped just short of the woman, his nose nearly touching the air around her swollen belly. His entire body trembled with the intensity of whatever he sensed. A baby began crying somewhere in the paralyzed crowd. Phones rose, recording the confrontation from a dozen angles. The tension became suffocating, pressing down on everyone in the checkpoint area like a physical weight. Two more officers stepped forward, their movements careful but determined. The woman looked from face to face, searching desperately for sympathy, for someone to intervene on her behalf. William met her eyes and saw something there that confirmed every instinct screaming in his gut. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute finality. "We're taking you in for secondary screening." The words hung in the air like a pronouncement of judgment. The woman's lips parted as if to protest, but no sound emerged. Duke's growl dropped to a low, continuous rumble. Security personnel closed in, not threatening, but inexorable. The chain of events had been set in motion. What followed would expose secrets buried so deep, protected by lies so carefully constructed, that even William could not have imagined the darkness waiting to be uncovered. The secondary screening room existed in a space most travelers never saw, tucked behind the public security checkpoints like a secret held by the airport itself. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh white illumination that left no shadows, no places to hide. The walls were painted institutional beige, bare, except for a single mirror that William knew was one-way glass. A security scanner hummed in the corner, its green lights blinking in steady rhythm like a mechanical heartbeat. They were rarely used, these rooms, reserved for special cases, for situations that demanded privacy and careful attention. This was such a situation. The officers escorted the woman through the checkpoint as the murmuring crowd parted around them like water around stone. Her paper shopping bags rustled with each step, one of the handles tearing further under the pressure of her white-knuckled grip. Behind them, Duke's growls had faded to low, anxious whines that echoed down the terminal corridor, a sound that somehow carried more weight than his earlier barking. William followed, one hand maintaining steady pressure on the leash. He could feel every vibration of tension running through Duke's body, transmitted through the leather and nylon into his palm. The dog's ears remained pinned forward, his gaze locked on the woman's retreating figure with the focus of a predator, unwilling to lose sight of its prey. "Easy, boy," William whispered. but the reassurance felt hollow even to his own ears. Duke's body language had not relaxed 1 degree. His muscles stayed coiled, ready. His breathing came quick and shallow. Whatever he sensed, whatever had triggered that unprecedented reaction, it had not diminished with distance or time. Inside the screening room, a female officer guided the woman to a chair. "Please, I don't understand what's happening," the woman said, her voice cracking with what seemed like genuine confusion and fear. She rubbed her belly in small, circular motions, murmuring something too quiet to hear. Sweat glistened on her forehead, despite the cool air conditioning. A female medical screener entered, her movements professional and efficient. 2 male officers took positions near the door. The protocol was clear. The steps well rehearsed. Examine the belongings first, then the person if necessary, always with care, always with respect for dignity and rights. William stood outside the glass window, watching. Rex paced beside him, unable to settle. Every few seconds, the dog would emit a soft whine, then paw at the door, as though trying to claw his way through. His nose pressed against the gap at the bottom, drawing in whatever scents leaked from the room beyond. The unease was contagious. William felt it tightening around his chest like bands of iron. Inside, the examination began. The shopping bags were opened carefully, their contents spread across the metal table. Baby clothes in soft pastels, neatly folded. Tiny socks no bigger than William's thumb, a teddy bear still wrapped in cellophane, a pacifier in its sealed package. Each item was scanned with the handheld detector, swabbed for residue, examined under careful scrutiny. Nothing unusual appeared, no alerts, no traces of anything dangerous or illegal. Officer Perez appeared at William's shoulder, arms crossed, expression skeptical. "She looks harmless," he said, not unkindly. "You sure this isn't a false alarm?" William did not take his eyes off Duke. "Rex doesn't false alarm, not once in 4 years." "She's pregnant," Perez pointed out, his voice dropping to a more sympathetic register. "Saw how she clutched her stomach. What if the dog just spooked at medication smell or something? Pregnant women take all kinds of supplements." William's jaw tightened. He's trained to recognize over 50 different scents. Narcotics, explosives, accelerants, even decaying tissue. He turned to meet Perez's eyes. Whatever he's reacting to isn't random. Through the glass, William watched the screener complete her examination of the bags. The woman slumped in her chair, breathing heavily. Her hands never stopped their circular motion over her belly, protective and constant. But something about the gesture struck William as wrong, though he could not immediately identify why. Then he saw it. The shape of her belly was too perfect, too uniformly round, lacking the natural asymmetry of a real pregnancy. Elizabeth had carried their child for 7 months before the miscarriage that had broken something in both of them. He remembered how her belly had shifted, how the baby's movements created visible ripples across her skin, how the shape changed depending on position and time of day. This woman's belly remained static, unchanging, and when she pressed her hands against it, the surface seemed too firm, lacking the give of flesh and fluid. Duke whined again, the sound rising in pitch. He pawed desperately at the door, claws scraping tile. Then he gave the particular bark William recognized from field operations, the one that meant distress, urgency, immediate danger. William crouched beside his partner. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. "What do you smell?" The dog's ears flicked back, his body trembling. His amber eyes met William's with an intensity that communicated what words could not. This was not uncertainty. This was absolute conviction. William made his decision. He straightened, pulling his Dorado from his belt. "We need medical on standby." Perez raised an eyebrow. "You think she's faking. I think she's hiding something," William said quietly. "And Rex knows it." Before Perez could respond, the woman inside the room gasped sharply. It was a sound of genuine agony, cutting through the glass barrier like a physical blow. She doubled over, both hands flying to her belly, her face contorting in pain. The chair scraped backward as she tried to stand, then collapsed back into it. "Something's wrong," she screamed, her voice raw with terror. "Oh, God, it hurts." Duke's reaction was immediate and violent. He barked frantically, slamming his body against the door with enough force to rattle the frame. William felt his blood turn to ice water in his veins. "Call medical now," he shouted, already moving toward the door. Inside the room, the female screener knelt beside the woman, her professional calm barely masking rising alarm. "Stay with me, ma'am. Try to breathe slowly." She turned to the officers. "Get the medical team immediately." One officer grabbed his radio, calling for emergency response. The other moved to help support the woman as her breathing became ragged, each inhalation shorter and more desperate than the last. William pushed through the door, Duke lunging forward beside him, whining with an anxiety William had never heard from him before. The sight that met them seemed to freeze time itself. The woman slumped in the chair, her face drenched in sweat, skin pale as paper. Her entire body trembled uncontrollably. Each breath came as a struggle, a fight against something invisible crushing her from within. Perez's voice crackled over the radio. "Medical team to Gate C. Immediate response required." Duke's usual composure had completely shattered. He circled the woman, barking repeatedly, his movements frantic rather than aggressive. His nose twitched wildly as he sniffed the air near her abdomen. Then he would back away with a whine. Tail tucked low, ears pinned flat against his skull, the medical screener checked the woman's pulse, her professional mask slipping. "Her pulse is irregular." "Yeah," she said, voice tight. "Very irregular." William knelt beside the chair, forcing himself to speak calmly despite his racing heart. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with difficulty. Tears streaked down her cheeks, cutting paths through the sheen of sweat. When she spoke, her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "It's not supposed to happen yet," she said, each word a struggle. 7 months. I still had time. Confusion flooded through William. "What do you mean? Is it labor?" She shook her head violently, the motion seeming to cost her tremendous effort. "No, not labor." Another spasm of pain crossed her features. "Something's wrong inside." Her voice faded to a sob. "Please save my baby." The door burst open with enough force to slam against the wall. 2 paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, their movements practiced and efficient. "Step aside," one commanded, immediately moving to assess vitals. "Be dropping fast," the other said, wrapping a cuff around her arm. "We need to move her now." As they worked, Duke started whining louder, abandoning his circles to dart toward the shopping bags still sitting on the examination table. He nudged one toward William with his nose, barking insistently, his claws scraping against the tile in his urgency. William moved quickly, opening the bag more thoroughly than the screener had. Clothes, supplies, nothing immediately suspicious. But beneath the pile of baby items, his fingers found something that made his breath catch, a small metallic patch sewn into the lining, no bigger than a coin. The material was wrong, too sophisticated for simple bag construction. "She's losing consciousness," one of the paramedics shouted. They lifted her onto the stretcher in one smooth motion. Her eyes fluttered closed, her lips moving in silent words. "Please," she whispered, so faint William barely heard. "My baby, we've got you," the paramedic assured her. "Stay with me." The stretcher rolled toward the door, wheels squeaking on tile. Duke followed immediately, still barking, still visibly unsettled. The hallway outside erupted into controlled chaos. As officers cleared a path, passengers pressed against walls to watch, and somewhere in the distance, sirens began their urgent wail. William ran beside the stretcher, his mind racing faster than his feet. Whatever was happening transcended simple medical emergency. Duke's behavior made that clear. The dog had detected something, sensed some danger that remained invisible to human eyes, but screamed warnings through every fiber of his being. As they reached the ambulance bay, William glanced down at his partner. "What did you find?" "Boy," he muttered. Duke looked up, his amber eyes burning with an urgency that needed no translation. The real danger had not been discovered yet. They were still missing something crucial, something that could mean the difference between life and death. The ambulance doors stood open, revealing the swirling snow beyond. Christmas lights from the terminal reflected off the ice, creating a surreal beauty that contrasted sharply with the emergency unfolding. William knew with absolute certainty that this was far from over. Whatever Duke had detected, whatever secret lay hidden beneath that woman's desperate fear, they were only beginning to understand the true scope of what they had uncovered. The ambulance siren cut through the December air like a blade, its wail rising and falling in woes that seemed to pierce directly into William's skull. He stood at the emergency bay doors, watching the vehicle disappear into the swirling snow. Red and blue lights painting the white landscape in violent colors. The sound had triggered something deep in his memory, something he had spent 15 years trying to bury. Suddenly, he was not standing in the cold Colorado morning, but in the scorching heat of an Afghan desert. The year was 2009, and the world was burning. The explosion had come without warning, as they always did. One moment, William had been walking point with his unit, scanning the dusty street for threats. The next, the ground beneath him erupted in fire and fury. He remembered the sensation of weightlessness as the blast threw him backward, the ringing in his ears that drowned out all other sound, the taste of copper and sand in his mouth. When his vision cleared, he was pinned beneath a collapsed wall, rebar pressed against his chest, making each breath an agony. Blood ran into his eyes from somewhere on his scalp. His legs were trapped, and when he tried to move them, white-hot pain shot through his body with such intensity that consciousness wavered. Through the smoke and dust, a figure appeared, Army medic, late 20s. Brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun despite the chaos. Her name tape read, Mitchell. She moved with calm efficiency through hell itself, her hands already reaching for him. "Stay with me, soldier," she said, her voice cutting through the ringing in his ears. "I've got you." And she worked quickly, assessing his injuries with practiced precision. Other soldiers groaned nearby, their voices distant and dreamlike. Martha Mitchell made her assessment in seconds. William was worst off. She focused on him, pulling debris away, checking for arterial bleeding, talking constantly to keep him conscious. "You're going to make it," she told him, her hands gentle despite their urgency. "Stay with me. Think about home. Think about who's waiting for you." Elizabeth, he remembered thinking. Elizabeth was waiting for him. They had been married only 8 months before his deployment. Martha worked to free his legs, her movements sure despite the continued sounds of combat around them. She had almost succeeded when she suddenly froze, her eyes focusing on something beyond William's field of vision. Her face changed. Fear flashed across her features for just an instant, then resolved into something else. Determination, acceptance, secondary device, she said quietly, more to herself than to him. William tried to turn his head to see what she was looking at, but she placed both hands on his shoulders. "Don't move." Her voice carried absolute authority. Then she did something William would never understand, would never be able to reconcile with any notion of self-preservation. She grabbed him by his vest and pulled with strength, born of desperation, dragging him clear of the collapsed wall even as his legs screamed in protest. The last thing he saw was her smile, not frightened, not regretful, just peaceful, as though she had made a choice she could live with in whatever moments remained. The explosion turned the world white. When William woke, he was in a medevac helicopter. A different medic was working on him, shouting information to someone William could not see. Through the open door, he could see the desert receding below, smoke rising from multiple points like fingers reaching toward an indifferent sky. Later, in the field hospital, they told him Sergeant Martha Mitchell had died in the blast. She had saved 3 soldiers that day, William among them. A Purple Heart would be awarded posthumously. Her family would receive a folded flag and the gratitude of a nation. William had carried the guilt ever since. Should have been me. He thought every day for 15 years, should have been me instead. The memory released him suddenly, dropping him back into the present with jarring force. He stood gasping in the ambulance bay, one hand braced against the wall, while Duke pressed against his leg, whining softly. A paramedic was asking him something. "Sir, are you all right?" William nodded, not trusting his voice. The PTSD episodes came less frequently now than in the early years, but the medication could only do so much against memories that sharp. "Just old memories," he managed to say. But something nagged at him, a connection his subconscious was trying to make. Why had he remembered Martha now, after all these years? What about this situation had triggered that specific memory? He pushed the question aside as another ambulance arrived. "I'm riding with her," he told the paramedic. "I need to see this through." 20 minutes later, Central Denver Medical Center's emergency bay exploded into activity as the ambulance screeched to a halt. The sliding doors burst open automatically, and paramedics rushed the stretcher through with practiced urgency. "Female, late 20s, approximately 7 months pregnant," one paramedic called out as they moved. "Severe abdominal pain, pulse unstable and weakening." Doctors and nurses materialized from various corridors. their movements choreographed by years of emergency response. They surrounded the stretcher like a living organism, each person taking their assigned role without need for discussion. The woman's cries echoed down the hallway, desperate and broken, each sound a knife that seemed to cut the air itself. "Please save my baby," she sobbed, her hand reaching out to clutch at a paramedic's sleeve before another wave of pain tore through her body. William and Duke arrived moments later, both breathless from the run through the parking lot. Snow dusted William's shoulders, melting into dark patches on his uniform. He flashed his badge at the reception desk. "Airport K-9 unit," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who expected no resistance. "I need updates on the woman just brought in." The nurse glanced at his badge, then at Duke, then nodded quickly. "Room 3, trauma wing." She pointed down a corridor to the left. William hurried through the hospital hallways, Duke pacing anxiously beside him. The dog's body remained tense despite the change in location, his nose working constantly to sort through the overwhelming mixture of disinfectant, illness, fear, and something else. Something metallic and synthetic that did not belong in a place of healing. Through the glass window of the trauma room, William watched the medical team work. The woman lay pale and trembling under bright surgical lights that turned everything harsh and shadowless. Electrodes covered her chest, wires snaking away to monitors that beeped and flashed with numbers William did not understand. An oxygen mask covered her face, fogging with each labored breath. A doctor moved into position beside her, tall with graying hair and the focused expression of someone who had seen too much to be easily surprised. He held a portable ultrasound probe, the device trailing a cable to a monitor mounted on a wheeled cart. William waited, his heart pounding against his ribs. Duke whined outside the door, his body language screaming warnings that no human voice could articulate. The monitor flickered to life, black and white static, gradually resolving into an image. The doctor moved the probe across the woman's swollen belly, his eyes fixed on the screen. Then he stopped. His expression changed subtly, professional composure cracking just enough to reveal confusion beneath. "That's unusual," he murmured. A nurse leaned closer to the monitor. "What is it, doctor?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he adjusted the probe, pressing it at different angles, seeking clarity in the grainy images. The outline on the screen was wrong, not the smooth, organic curves of a developing fetus, but something jagged and geometric, something that reflected the ultrasound waves in ways that flesh and bone should not, something metallic glinted faintly in the depths of the image. The doctor's face went pale. He straightened, his voice dropping to the controlled tone of someone delivering news they wished they did not have to speak. "This isn't normal fetal movement," he said quietly. "There's something artificial here, a foreign object inside the abdominal cavity." William stepped inside the room without conscious thought. "Doctor, what are you saying?" The man turned, taking in William's uniform and the urgency in his voice. He lowered his voice further, though everyone in the room could hear. "There's a foreign object inside her abdomen. It looks like some kind of container or casing, multiple compartments." He paused, his medical training warring with disbelief. "I've never seen anything like it." Duke whined outside the door, and the sound carried the weight of confirmation. William's stomach dropped. "You mean she's not actually pregnant?" The nurse's voice carried a mixture of shock and confusion. The doctor hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "There's a structure that imitates pregnancy, but it's synthetic. Hollow compartments arranged in a way that mimics a uterus and fetus." He straightened fully, his jaw setting with decision. "Get the surgical team ready. Immediately. We need to remove this now." William's breath caught in his throat. "She's carrying something," he said, more to himself than anyone else. That's what Rex sensed. Not just drugs hidden in luggage or strapped to a body. Something far more sophisticated, something surgically implanted or inserted, hidden where security scanners would see only what appeared to be a natural pregnancy. While chaos unfolded at the hospital, across the city in her airport office, Catherine Walsh watched the news coverage on her computer screen. The airport director sat behind her polished mahogany desk, silver hair pulled into an elegant bun, her business suit crisp despite the early hour. At 60, she projected an image of competence and compassion that had served her well over 2 decades in airport administration. Her wall displayed commendations from the mayor, certificates of appreciation from law enforcement, photos of her speaking at community events, the perfect pillar of public service. But her hand gripped the edge of her desk hard enough to make her knuckles white as she watched the local news report. Breaking news from Denver International Airport, where a pregnant woman was detained this morning after a security dog alerted on her. The woman has been transported to Central Denver Medical Center in critical condition. Airport officials are not yet commenting on the nature of the incident, but witnesses report seeing K-9 officer William Harrison and his dog Duke involved in the initial confrontation. Catherine reached for her phone, her movements controlled despite the tension visible in every line of her body. She dialed a number from memory, waiting through 2 rings before a voice answered. "We have a problem," she said without preamble, her voice cold and flat. "The Mitchell woman made it to the hospital." A pause as she listened. "No, the dog detected her. William Harrison's dog." Another pause, longer this time. Her expression did not change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Calculation, assessment of risk. Activate contingency protocol," she said finally. "If she talks, everything is exposed." She listened again. "How long before surgery?" The answer made her lips thin into a hard line. 30 minutes. That's not enough time." She stood, walking to the window that overlooked the terminal below. Snow continued to fall, blanketing the runways in white. Execute Plan B. She ended the call and opened her desk's locked lower drawer. Inside, carefully hidden beneath routine office supplies, sat another phone, a burner device, untraceable. Beside it, a stack of passports, each with a different name and photo that resembled but did not exactly match Catherine's face. And something else that caught the light. A wedding ring, worn and scratched with age. A small tag attached to it bore the inscription, E. Harrison. Elizabeth Harrison, William's dead wife's ring. Catherine lifted it, holding it up to the light. She had worn this ring for 2 years, hidden under her own wedding band where no one would notice. A trophy from a victory William did not even know had been a war. "Should have minded your own business," she whispered to the ring, to the memory of the woman who once wore it. She returned the ring to the drawer and locked it. Then she straightened her suit, checked her reflection in the window's glass, and allowed her face to settle into an expression of concerned authority. She had a press conference to give, reassuring the public that security was her top priority, that the incident was being handled with all appropriate care. She had played this role for so long that the mask had become a second skin. In the hospital operating room, preparations moved forward with urgent efficiency. Sarah Mitchell lay unconscious on the surgical table as the anesthesiologist prepared his equipment. The surgical team assembled, scrubbing in, discussing approach and contingencies in the shorthand of medical professionals. The doctor who had performed the ultrasound stood at the head of the table, studying the images one more time. The structure inside her abdomen was complex, clearly designed by someone with both medical knowledge and engineering expertise. Removing it would require precision and care. One wrong move could rupture the sealed compartments. And if the contents were as toxic as he suspected, Sarah would die within minutes. 6 months earlier, Sarah Mitchell had been sitting in her small apartment, staring at a pile of medical bills scattered across her coffee table like accusatory documents. Each one bore amounts that made her stomach twist. Total outstanding $350,000. Her mother's cancer treatment, stage 4, the doctors had said. Aggressive chemotherapy was her only chance, and insurance covered barely a fraction of the cost. When the phone rang, Sarah had almost not answered. Unknown number, probably another collection agency. But something made her pick up. Miss Mitchell. The voice was warm, maternal almost. I'm calling about your mother's account at Memorial Hospital. Sarah's heart sank. I know I'm behind on payments. I'm trying. I just need more time. Actually, I'm calling to help. A pause. There's a special program for families in crisis situations like yours, a way to resolve your debt completely. Sarah had sat up straighter. What kind of program? It's a courier service. We need someone reliable to transport medical supplies across state lines, one trip paid in full upon completion. $400,000. The number had seemed impossible. Life-changing. What would I have to do? Wear a special device that allows you to pass through security without questions. It looks like a pregnancy. No one suspects a pregnant woman. Us. You meet our contact on the other side, hand over the device, and walk away with enough money to save your mother's life. Sarah should have questioned it, should have recognized the red flags waving frantically in front of her face. But all she could see was her mother's face, drawn and pale from the chemotherapy that was bankrupting them both. When do I start? She had asked now, as the surgical team prepared to cut into her abdomen. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. The medication created a twilight state where reality blurred with memory and nightmare. She saw her mother's face, heard the doctor's words about survival rates and treatment options, felt the weight of impossible debt crushing her like physical pressure. She had thought she was making a sacrifice to save someone she loved. She had not known she was being used as a weapon. Back at the hospital, William paced the corridor outside the operating theater. His mind would not settle, kept returning to questions that circled without answers. His phone buzzed. A text from Officer Martinez at the airport. We searched her belongings more thoroughly, found something in the bag lining, not just fabric, tracking device, biological monitor, someone was watching her vitals remotely in real time. This is sophisticated, military grade. William's blood ran cold. Who had the resources for something like this? The technology was expensive. The operation complex. This was not some amateur smuggling attempt. This required money, expertise, and most damning of all, inside access to airport security systems. Duke suddenly jumped to his feet, barking at the television mounted in the waiting area. William turned to see what had triggered the reaction. The news was showing a press conference. Catherine Walsh stood at a podium, the airport logo visible behind her, her expression grave and concerned. "The incident this morning was regrettable," she was saying. "But I want to assure the public that security is and always will be our highest priority. We are cooperating fully with all law enforcement agencies." Duke's bark turned into a growl, low and continuous. The hackles along his spine rose slowly, his body language transforming from alert to actively hostile. Dogs did not typically react to television images. The screen was just flickering light and sound to them, lacking the scent markers that triggered real recognition, unless they remembered the scent from real life. William stared at the screen, his mind making connections he did not want to acknowledge. Catherine Walsh had been the one who hired him after Elizabeth died. She had been supportive, kind, offering him the airport security position when he needed stability most. A memory surfaced, one he had not thought about in 2 years. Elizabeth's last day alive. She had mentioned meeting someone from the airport about something she had discovered. She had never said who, never explained what. That night, her car had gone off the road. Brake failure, the accident report had said. But Elizabeth was meticulous about car maintenance, checking everything regularly. What if it had not been an accident? William's hands started to shake. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos until he found what he was looking for. Elizabeth's last selfie, taken the day she died. She stood in front of a building, smiling at the camera. Behind her, partially visible in the background, was an office door. The nameplate was just barely readable when he zoomed in Catherine Walsh, airport director. The phone nearly slipped from William's trembling fingers. Duke was still growling at the television, still staring at Catherine's image with undisguised hostility. "Do you know her, boy?" William whispered. "Were you there the day Elizabeth died?" He grabbed Duke's vest, feeling in the pockets for something he had never properly examined. His old military vest from Afghanistan, the one with Martha's blood still visible in faded stains. He wore it under his uniform every day, unable to let it go. His fingers found a thick spot in the lining he had never noticed before. He ripped the seam open. A folded piece of paper fell into his palm. Elizabeth's handwriting covered both sides, the ink slightly smudged, but still readable. The date at the top made his vision blur. The day she died. "Will, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I discovered a smuggling ring operating inside the airport. Director Catherine Walsh is involved. She's killed before, and she'll kill again. I can't go to the police because some of them are compromised. You're the only person I trust. Trust Duke. He knows more than we do. I love you. Always did. Always will. Don't let her win." William's legs gave out. He sank into a chair, the letter crumpling in his fist as tears streamed down his face. For 2 years he had thought it was an accident. 2 years of guilt, of wondering if he could have prevented it somehow. 2 years of Catherine Walsh watching him grieve, probably enjoying every moment of his suffering. She had murdered his wife. Inside the operating room, the surgeon made the first careful incision. Sarah's vitals remained stable but precarious. Each heartbeat a fragile thing that could fail at any moment. As the scalpel cut deeper, something became visible beneath the skin. Not flesh, not the expected layers of tissue and muscle, something artificial and precisely manufactured. The nurse assisting gasped softly. "Doctor," she said, "look at this." The surgeon paused, adjusting the surgical lamp to get a better view of what he had just exposed. A perfect silicone prosthetic, shaped and weighted to mimic a pregnant uterus. Tubes ran through it, connected to a small mechanical device that created a rhythmic pulse, imitating a fetal heartbeat for any external monitoring. And within the prosthetic, sealed compartments held something that made the entire surgical team hold their breath. Liquid, dark and viscous, contained in multiple capsules arranged like Russian nesting dolls, one inside another, each seal designed to fail if tampered with incorrectly. One of the capsules showed a hairline crack. Liquid had begun to leak, seeping into Sarah's abdominal cavity, slowly poisoning her from the inside. "Get toxicology up here immediately," the surgeon said, his voice tight. "And we need to move very carefully. If these rupture completely, she's dead." In another part of the hospital, a nurse was processing Sarah's personal belongings. Wallet, phone, keys, standard procedure. The wallet fell open and a photo slipped out. The nurse picked it up, her curiosity idle at first, then sharpening into something else. The photo showed a young woman in army uniform holding a baby. The woman's smile was bright despite the military setting. The name visible on her uniform made the nurse's breath catch. S.G. Tit Martha Mitchell. The nurse stared at the photo, then at Sarah's driver's license. Sarah Mitchell, the same last name. She opened the hospital's computer system, typing quickly. A search for Martha Mitchell brought up records from 15 years ago. Killed in action, Afghanistan, 2009. Medal of Honor recipient, saved 3 soldiers in her final act. The list of soldiers saved included one name the nurse recognized, CPL William Harrison. "Oh my God," she whispered. She grabbed the intercom phone. "Can Officer Harrison come to the consultation room immediately? The doctor needs to speak with him about the patient's identity." In the waiting area, William stood abruptly when he heard his name over the hospital's public address system. His mind was still reeling from Elizabeth's letter, from the revelation that Catherine had murdered her. Now they needed to speak with him about the patient's identity. He did not understand what that could mean, but he moved quickly toward the consultation room, Duke padding beside him, equally alert, despite the long, strange day. Whatever he was about to learn would connect everything, past and present, guilt and redemption, the debts that transcended death itself. The circle was closing, though he did not yet understand its complete shape. The consultation room door closed behind William with a quiet click that seemed too mundane for the moment. Inside, the doctor who had performed the ultrasound stood beside a desk, his expression grave, The nurse who had called him stood near the wall, holding something in her hands. "Officer Harrison," the doctor began, "we need to discuss the patient's condition and her identity." William's jaw tightened. "Is she going to survive?" "That's complicated." The doctor gestured to a chair, but William remained standing. The device inside her abdomen contains multiple sealed capsules. One of them has ruptured. Liquid fentanyl is leaking into her bloodstream at a rate that will cause fatal toxicity in approximately 90 minutes. The words hit William like physical blows. He checked his watch, 12:17 p.m. "Fatal toxicity by 1:47, he said, his military training automatically calculating timelines. "Exactly. The complication is that the device has a fail-safe mechanism. If we attempt to remove the capsules without the correct deactivation sequence, all of them will rupture simultaneously. She'll die within minutes." "Deactivation sequence? From who?" "Whoever designed this system." The doctor's voice carried barely suppressed anger. "This is sophisticated biomedical engineering combined with what appears to be smuggling technology. Someone with significant resources and knowledge created this." William's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen to see Martinez's name. "Excuse me," he said, answering immediately. "What is it?" "William, we have a much bigger problem." Martinez's voice carried an edge of panic William had never heard from the veteran officer. "We pulled security footage and cross-referenced flight manifests. Flight 247 to Miami, boarding in 6 hours, 30 women on the passenger list, all traveling alone, all showing as pregnant in tape pre-check documentation." The implications crashed over William like a tsunami. "You think they're all carrying devices?" "I'd bet my badge on it. If that plane takes off with 30 of these things on board, and someone triggers them remotely." Martinez did not need to finish the sentence. "Mass casualty event, hundreds dead. A terrorist attack disguised as an accident." William's mind raced through impossible mathematics. 90 minutes until Sarah died, 6 hours until Flight 2 departed, and Catherine could flee at any moment. He could not possibly do all three save Sarah. Stop the flight and catch Catherine. "Ground that flight," William ordered. "Emergency security protocol. Full evacuation of all passengers. I'm going after Catherine." "William, wait! You can't just—" "She killed Elizabeth Ahui." The words came out flat, hard. "She's behind all of this, and she has the deactivation code Sarah needs to survive." He ended the call and turned back to the doctor. "Keep her alive. I'll get that code." The nurse stepped forward, holding out the photo she had found. "Officer Harrison, there's something else you need to know about who she is." William took the photo, his breath catching as he recognized the uniform, the name tape, the face he had seen only in nightmares and guilt-laden memories for 15 years. Sergeant Martha Mitchell, holding a baby. "The patient's name is Sarah Mitchell," the nurse said softly. "Martha Mitchell was her mother." The room seemed to tilt. William gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. "Martha's daughter," he whispered. "I've been trying to save Martha's daughter." Duke whined, pressing against William's leg, sensing his master's emotional upheaval. "We thought you should know," the doctor said, "before you go after whoever did this." William looked down at the photo one more time, at Martha's thread, at the baby she had left behind. Then he handed it back to the nurse and turned toward the door, his jaw set with terrible purpose. "Keep her alive," he repeated. "I owe her mother a debt 15 years overdue." The drive back to the airport took 12 minutes through snow-choked streets. William pushed his patrol car as fast as he dared, lights flashing. Duke braced in the passenger seat. His mind cycled through everything he knew, everything he had missed. Catherine had been at Elizabeth's funeral, had offered him the job personally, had kept him close, watching him grieve, probably savoring every moment of his pain. She had played the role of compassionate authority figure while orchestrating an operation that used desperate women as living containers for poison. And somewhere in all of this was a connection to Afghanistan, to Martha, to the ghosts that had haunted him for 15 years. He pulled into the airport's administrative parking area and took the elevator to the executive level. Duke stayed close, his body language radiating controlled aggression. The dog knew they were hunting now. Catherine's office door was closed but not locked. William did not bother knocking. He pushed it open with enough force to make it slam against the wall. Catherine sat behind her desk, composed and elegant, as though she had been expecting him. "Officer Harrison," she said calmly, "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." William closed the door behind him. Duke growled low and continuous, positioning himself between William and Catherine. "I know what you did. To Elizabeth, to those women, all of it. Do you—" Catherine's smile was cold. "Do you really understand? You're running a smuggling operation using pregnant women as cover. You murdered my wife when she discovered it. You've been watching me suffer for 2 years." His voice was remarkably steady, despite the rage burning through his veins. "What I don't understand is why—" Catherine stood slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the terminal. "Do you know who Sarah Mitchell is, Martha Mitchell's daughter? And do you know why that matters to me?" She turned, and for the first time, William saw something raw in her expression. Pain, old and deep and transformed into something poisonous. "Martha Mitchell saved your life in Afghanistan. The explosion that killed her. The one she pushed you clear of. Do you remember who else died that day?" William's blood went cold. "Captain James Walsh." Catherine's voice cracked slightly. "My husband. He died covering your unit's retreat. Martha saved you. James died so you could escape. And for 15 years, you've lived the life he should have had." The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. "So you've been punishing me. I've been evening the scales." Catherine's composure was cracking now, the mask slipping to reveal the grief-twisted features beneath. "You got to go home. You got your wife, your career, your peace." James got a folded flag and hollow words of gratitude. "So you killed Elizabeth." William's voice rose. "Turned yourself into exactly what James died fighting against. You think he'd want this? Don't you dare speak about what he'd want." Catherine's shout echoed off the walls. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything, while the person who should have died gets to keep living. I know exactly what it's like." William shouted back, "I have carried the guilt of Martha's death for 15 years. I've wished every day that it had been me instead. And then you killed the one person who made living bearable, who helped me believe I deserved the life Martha gave me." Catherine pulled open her desk drawer. Her hand emerged holding a pistol, the metal catching the fluorescent light. "You're not leaving this office. Sarah dies in—" She checked her watch. 73 minutes. Those women on flight 247 are my insurance policy. If I go down, they go up, literally. Duke snarled, muscles coiling to attack. Catherine swung the gun toward him. Call him off, or I shoot the dog. William's heart stopped. Not Duke. He could not lose Duke. Rex, stay! The command came out strangled. The dog held position, but continued growling, every fiber of his being screaming to protect his master. Give me the deactivation code, William said, forcing his voice level. Save Sarah. She's innocent. She's Martha's daughter, for God's sake. Don't make Martha's sacrifice meaningless by killing her child. Something flickered across Catherine's face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or the ghost of the woman she had been before grief consumed her. Like my husband's death was meaningless, she whispered. Like all those years of pain meant nothing. James died a hero, William said quietly. Everyone who knew him says so. He made a choice to protect his unit. That's not meaningless, but what you've become. He gestured at the office, at the gun, at the woman who had twisted her pain into poison. This dishonors everything he stood for. The office door burst open. FBI agent Reynolds entered with weapon drawn, 2 more agents behind him. Catherine Walsh, FBI, you're under arrest. Catherine spun. Gun rising, DeFoss, finger tightening on the trigger. I'll press the button. All 30 women die. Another man entered. Someone William recognized from airport security, Robert Sullivan, who had been investigating the smuggling reports. He held up a small device, its screen showing lines of code. She can't trigger them. Agent Reynolds, Sullivan said calmly. I disabled the remote detonation system 10 minutes ago. Catherine's face transformed from fury to shock to something like betrayal. Sullivan, you're FBI undercover. 3 years deep in your operation. Sullivan's voice carried no satisfaction, only weariness. We've been building the case. William's wife, Elizabeth, tipped us off before she died. We couldn't move until we had everyone in your network. But you forced our hand. The gun wavered in Catherine's hand. You still need the code for Sarah, she said desperately. The code dies with me. She started to raise the gun toward her own head. Duke moved. The German shepherd launched himself across the office in a blur of dark fur and muscle, not attacking to kill, but executing the perfect takedown he had been trained for. His weight hit Catherine's arm as the gun fired, the shot going wild into the ceiling. The weapon clattered across the floor as Duke pinned her, not biting, just using his body weight to restrain until the agents could secure her. Catherine sobbed as they cuffed her wrists. He'd hate what I've become, she whispered. James would be so ashamed. Sullivan crouched beside her. Give us the code, or die knowing you failed completely. Your husband would be ashamed either way, but at least save it an innocent life. Catherine's face crumpled. 15 years of rage and grief collapsed inward, leaving only a broken woman who had destroyed herself in pursuit of vengeance that solved nothing. 2479209, she whispered. The date James died, March 14th, 2009. William was already on his phone, dialing the hospital. Code is 2479209, he shouted as soon as the doctor answered. That's the deactivation sequence. In the operating room, The surgeon's hands moved with controlled urgency. A nurse input the numbers into the device's interface. The screen flashed red, then amber, then finally green. The ominous beeping stopped. "It's unlocked," the nurse said, her voice flooding with relief. The surgeon worked quickly, removing the capsules one by one with delicate precision. The first one, cracked and leaking, went into a sealed containment vessel. The second, still intact, followed. The third hissed slightly as he extracted it, making everyone in the room hold their breath. But then it, too, was secure. "All devices extracted," he announced. "Sarah, if you can hear me, you're going to be okay." On the monitor, Sarah's vital signs began to stabilize. Blood pressure rising from the dangerous lows go over 60, then 100 over 60, heart rate normalizing from its frantic pace, a beats per minute, then 92, then 88. Color slowly returned to her face. At the airport, bomb squad technicians carefully screened the 30 women who had been detained from Flight 247. Each one carried an identical prosthetic device, each filled with the same lethal cargo. Using Catherine's code, they deactivated and removed each device safely. The women wept, some from relief, some from rage at being used, all from the overwhelming trauma of discovering they had been walking weapons. Officers and counselors moved among them, taking statements, offering support, beginning the long process of helping victims understand they were not criminals. Martinez coordinated the operation, his normally stern face showing rare emotion as he watched woman after woman freed from devices that would have killed them all. In Catherine's office, FBI agents led her away in handcuffs. She did not resist, did not speak, just moved like a sleepwalker through a nightmare of her own creation. Sullivan watched her go, then turned to William. "Your wife was a hero," he said quietly. "She gathered 90% of the evidence we needed. Without her courage, we never would have caught Catherine." William nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "There's something else you should know," Sullivan continued. "Captain James Walsh was my unit commander in Afghanistan. He saved my life 3 times. When Elizabeth contacted the FBI about Catherine, I volunteered for the undercover assignment to honor the commander by stopping what his widow had become." He pulled out a photo from his wallet, a younger Sullivan in uniform, standing beside a man whose name tape read Walsh. "The commander died protecting his people," Sullivan said. "His wife lived by destroying them, but his legacy lives in those he saved, including you, including me, and now, including Sarah Mitchell." William looked down at Duke, who sat calmly now, his mission accomplished. The dog looked up at his master with amber eyes that held no judgment, only loyalty and love. "Good boy," William whispered, his hand stroking Duke's head. "Such a good boy." The call came 20 minutes later. Sarah was awake, stable, and asking for the officer who had saved her life. William drove back to the hospital through streets where the snow was finally beginning to lighten, as though even the weather recognized that the worst had passed. Duke sat in the passenger seat, finally relaxed, his tail giving occasional wags. They had done it, against impossible odds, through pain and revelation and the weight of 15 years of guilt. They had saved Martha Mitchell's daughter. The debt had been paid, not because it erased the past or solved the grief or made the sacrifice less heavy, but because it gave meaning to the survival, purpose to the life that had been bought with Martha's courage and James Walsh's sacrifice. As William pulled into the hospital parking lot, he touched the chain around his neck where Elizabeth's ring rested against his heart. "We got her," he whispered. "We got Catherine, and we saved Martha's little girl." He could almost hear Elizabeth's voice in response, warm and proud. "I knew you would." The storm was passing, and though the scars would remain, there was finally light breaking through the clouds. William found himself in the hospital chapel without remembering how he had gotten there. The small room existed in a pocket of quiet, separate from the chaos of the emergency department, a place where grief was expected and given space to breathe. Wooden pews faced a simple altar. A single window filtered afternoon light through plain glass, casting no colors, offering no comfort beyond acknowledgement that the world continued turning regardless of individual suffering. He collapsed onto the front pew, his body folding inward as though trying to contain an explosion happening inside his chest. Duke pressed against his legs, the dog's solid warmth the only anchor keeping him from disappearing entirely into the abyss of revelation. For 2 years, he had carried the guilt of Elizabeth's death. 2 years of thinking it was an accident, of torturing himself with questions about whether he could have prevented it somehow. Should he have checked her brakes? Should he have insisted she not drive in bad weather? Should he have been with her that night instead of working late? 2 years of Catherine Walsh watching him suffer, probably savoring every moment. The letter, crumpled in his fist, spoke truths he had been too blind to see. Elizabeth had discovered the smuggling operation by accident, had followed leads, had documented everything. She had contacted the FBI, had put herself in danger deliberately because she believed it was right, and Catherine had murdered her for it, then offered William the airport job, keeping him close like a trophy, feeding on his grief like a parasite. "She knew," William whispered to the empty chapel, his voice breaking. "Elizabeth tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. I didn't see the signs." His hands shook violently as he spread the letter open again, reading Elizabeth's familiar handwriting through tears that made the ink blur. She had written this the day she died, had hidden it in his vest knowing he wore it constantly, knowing eventually he would find it, a message from beyond the grave, delivered 2 years too late. Duke whined softly, his large head pushing against William's palm. The gesture was simple, wordless, but it carried weight. The dog had been there the day Elizabeth died, had been at the scene barking frantically, trying to tell everyone what William now knew: it had not been an accident. How did I not see? William's voice rose, echoing off the chapel walls. For 2 years, Catherine came to our house, offered sympathy, gave me the job. She looked me in the eye at Elizabeth's funeral, and I never suspected. I never knew. The rage came him then, hot and vicious, burning through the grief like acid. Catherine had not just killed his wife. She had turned Elizabeth's death into a performance, had used William's pain as entertainment, had watched him break and rebuild himself while knowing she had caused it all. But beneath the rage lived something more complicated. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of familiar pain, twisted into something monstrous. Catherine's husband had died in Afghanistan the same day Martha Mitchell saved William's life. Captain James Walsh, who had covered his unit's retreat, who had died so others could escape. William understood that kind of loss. He had carried Martha's death for 15 years, had felt the crushing weight of wondering why he had survived when someone better had died. But he had never let that guilt transform into hatred. He had never looked at the people Martha saved and decided they deserved to suffer for living. Catherine had made a different choice. She had let her grief ferment into poison, had convinced herself that William's survival was theft, that his happiness was an insult to James's memory, and in seeking to destroy William, she had become exactly what her husband died fighting against. "I don't understand," William said, though whether he was speaking to Duke, to God, or to the ghost that haunted him was unclear. "How does love turn into that? How does grief make you hurt innocent people?" Duke had no answer, but his presence said enough. Some questions had no satisfying responses. Down the hall, Sarah Mitchell opened her eyes to harsh fluorescent lights and the steady beep of medical monitors. For a moment, she existed in that merciful space between sleeping and full consciousness, where reality had not yet reasserted itself. Then awareness crashed over her like a wave, bringing with it the full weight of what had happened. Her hand moved automatically to her belly, seeking the familiar roundness. Instead, she felt only flatness, bandages, the absence of what she had believed was growing inside her. "My baby," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "Where's my baby?" A nurse appeared at her bedside, her face kind, but her eyes holding knowledge Sarah was not ready to receive. "Miss Mitchell, you're safe now. You're in the hospital. Do you remember what happened?" Sarah tried to sit up, panic flooding through her veins. "My baby, I need to know if my baby is okay." The nurse's hand was gentle on her shoulder, easing her back against the pillows. "Honey, there was no baby. You were carrying a prosthetic device. Someone used you. Do you understand? There was never a pregnancy." The words made no sense. Sarah stared at the nurse, trying to process language that seemed to come from a foreign tongue. No baby prosthetic device, but she had felt it, had carried the weight for months, had talked to it, had promised it a better life than she had known. "No," Sarah said, her voice rising. "No. They told me I was carrying medical supplies. They said... But even as she spoke, the lies began to unravel. The woman on the phone with her maternal voice, the urgent need for someone reliable, the device that looked like pregnancy but felt too firm, too perfectly round, the money, so much money for such a simple task. What was I carrying? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer would destroy whatever remained of her self-image. "Narcotics," the nurse said gently. "Enough to kill hundreds of people. One of the capsules ruptured. That's why you collapsed. You were being poisoned from the inside." Sarah felt her world implode. She had not been saving her mother. She had been a weapon, a human container for poison, a tool used by people who saw her desperation and exploited it without mercy. "My mother?" she gasped. "Is she? The cancer?" "Your mother is healthy," the nurse said. "She's outside waiting to see you. The medical records you were shown were fabricated. The debt was fake. All of it was designed to manipulate you." The truth was somehow worse than if her mother had actually been dying. At least then Sarah's choices would have made sense. At least then there would have been real stakes justifying her actions. But she had risked everything, had allowed herself to be turned into a smuggler for a crisis that did not exist. How many people would have died? Sarah whispered. If it had worked, if I had delivered the drugs, how many? The nurse hesitated, then decided truth was kinder than comfortable lies. We don't know. Potentially hundreds, maybe thousands. The network was extensive. Sarah turned her face toward the wall, unable to bear the weight of what she had almost done. Innocent deaths that would have been her responsibility, even if she had not known, even if she had been manipulated. The guilt was crushing, suffocating, absolute. When her mother and grandmother Dorothy entered the room moments later, Sarah could not look at them. She felt their love radiating toward her, felt their relief and forgiveness, but she could not accept it. How could they forgive her when she could not forgive herself across the city? In a hospital conference room, 30 women sat in a circle that felt more like a battlefield triage unit than a support group. They ranged in age from 25 to 35, came from different states, different backgrounds, different circumstances, but they shared one terrible bond. They had all been used as living weapons by Catherine Walsh's organization. The FBI counselor specialized in trauma, but even she seemed shaken by the scope of what these women had endured. Each had been recruited with a different lie, each vulnerability carefully assessed and exploited. Single mothers drowning in medical debt, students crushed under loans, ops survivors needing money to disappear. Catherine's network had hunted them like prey, identified their pressure points, and squeezed until they broke. One woman, Lisa Patterson, described how they had shown her photos of her children at school. Subtle threats wrapped in concern. Another, Rebecca Torres, had been told her mother would lose her home if she did not cooperate. Jennifer Walsh, whose ironic last name made Sarah flinch, had been promised safety from an ex-husband who kept finding her no matter where she fled. I thought I was transporting cash, Jennifer said, her voice hollow. Tax evasion money. They said I figured that was a victimless crime. But drugs, people die from drugs. We're victims too, the counselor said firmly. You were coerced, manipulated, threatened. You didn't know what you were carrying. That matters. But Sarah saw in the other women's faces the same guilt she felt. Yes, they were victims, but they had also made choices, however limited their options, however desperate their circumstances. That complexity was hard to live with. How do we move forward? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. How do we live with this? The counselor's answer was honest, rather than comforting, one day at a time, with support, with therapy, with the understanding that you're not alone. She gestured around the circle. You have each other. That's not nothing. In a police holding cell downtown, Catherine Walsh sat on a metal bench, her expensive suit wrinkled, tin, and torn, her carefully maintained facade completely shattered. She clutched a photograph of James, the only personal item she had been allowed to keep. His face smiled up at her from frozen time, forever young, forever proud in his uniform, forever innocent of what his widow had become. I'm sorry, she whispered to the photo, her voice raw from crying. James, I'm so sorry. For 15 years, she had convinced herself she was honoring his memory. Evening scales. extracting justice from a universe that had taken the best man she knew. But looking at his face now, she knew with crushing certainty what he would think of her actions. He would be ashamed, disgusted, heartbroken that the woman he loved had become the thing he spent his life fighting against. The descent had been gradual, a series of small compromises that seemed justified at the time. First, just watching William Harrison, studying the man who lived while James died. Then, small acts of sabotage, petty revenge that felt satisfying in the moment. Then, the discovery that she could use her position to facilitate smuggling, that desperate people would do almost anything for money. Then murder. When Elizabeth Harrison got too close to the truth, each step had seemed necessary, each escalation justified by the one before. But now, sitting in a cell with James's photo, Catherine saw the path clearly. She had not honored his sacrifice. She had desecrated it. She had become exactly the kind of person he Dots are trying to stop. "They're going to ask me why," she said to the photo, tears streaming on her face. "And I don't have an answer anymore. I thought I did. I thought it made sense. But it was all just pain, James, just pain I couldn't stop feeling. So I tried to make everyone else hurt too." The tragedy was not just in what she had done, but in what she had lost of herself. The woman James married would have been horrified by the woman Catherine became. Somewhere between the funeral and today, that better version of herself had died, replaced by something twisted and cruel. Catherine thought about the 30 women in the hospital, about Sarah Mitchell fighting for her life, about William Harrison's grief, about all the destruction she had caused. And she thought about James, who had died protecting people he did not know, because he believed every life had value. She had failed him in every possible way. The realization brought no comfort, no redemption, no path forward, just the hollow acknowledgement that she had destroyed herself, pursuing vengeance that solved nothing, healed nothing, honored nothing. She was broken beyond repair, and the worst part was knowing she had done it to herself. The hospital consultation room seemed too small for the weight of revelation it now contained. William stood near the window, Elizabeth's letter still crumpled in his hand, while Sarah Mitchell lay in the recovery room down the hall, her life saved by a code extracted from a woman consumed by vengeance. The door opened, and an older woman entered, her face lined with age and worry. She moved immediately toward the nurse, her voice urgent. "My daughter? Sarah Mitchell. They said she was here, that she was hurt." William turned, and the world seemed to stop. The woman's face was older, weathered by years and grief, but unmistakable. He had seen that face in a photograph Sarah carried, had seen it in his nightmares for 15 years. Not Martha herself, who had died saving him, but someone who carried her features, her bearing, her essence. "You're Martha's mother," William said, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman turned to him, confusion crossing her features. "Yes, Dorothy Mitchell. Do I know you?" "No, ma'am, but I knew your daughter." William's hands trembled. "In Afghanistan, she saved my life." Dorothy's expression transformed from confusion to understanding to something deeper. "You're one of them," she said softly. "One of the soldiers Martha died for." "William Harrison, ma'am." He stood straighter, military bearing reasserting itself automatically in the presence of a gold star mother. Your daughter was the bravest person I've ever known. Dorothy moved closer, studying his face with eyes that had Martha's color, Martha's intensity. Martha wrote letters home about her unit. She never mentioned names, said it was bad luck, but she talked about the men she treated, said every one of them mattered. Every life was worth saving. She saved 3 of us that day, William said, his voice breaking. She pushed me clear of a secondary explosion, took the blast herself. I've carried that guilt every day since. Guilt. Dorothy's voice sharpened. Young man, my daughter didn't die so you could feel guilty. She died doing exactly what she chose to do, saving lives, being a soldier, honoring her oath. The nurse stepped forward, holding out the photo. Mrs. Mitchell, there's something you need to understand about what happened today. Officer Harrison saved your granddaughter's life. Sarah was being used by criminals, carrying something dangerous inside her body. His dog detected it. He saved her. Dorothy looked from the nurse to William, understanding dawning in stages. You saved Sarah, she said slowly. 15 years after Martha saved you, you saved her daughter. I didn't know, William said. I had no idea she was Martha's daughter until an hour ago. If I had known, you would have done exactly what you did, Dorothy interrupted firmly. Because that's what good people do. They save who they can, when they can, without asking for payment or recognition. She reached out, taking his hand in both of hers. My daughter would be so proud, not because you repaid some imaginary debt, but because you became the kind of man worth saving. William felt tears streaming down his face, years of guilt beginning to crack under the weight of forgiveness he had never thought to seek. Can I see her? He asked. Sarah. She's been asking for you, the nurse said. They walked together to Sarah's recovery room, Dorothy and William, with Duke padding silently between them. The dog's presence seemed to ease something in Dorothy, her hand occasionally dropping to stroke his head. Sarah lay propped against pillows, her face pale but alive, her eyes clear. When she saw William, recognition sparked in her expression. You're the officer, she said, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube, the one whose dog wouldn't stop barking. Yes, ma'am, William Harrison. He paused, then added, Your mother saved my life 15 years ago. Sarah's eyes widened. You're one of the soldiers from Afghanistan, the ones she wrote about. I'm the one who should have died instead of her. No. Sarah's voice was surprisingly firm. Don't say that. Don't think that. She reached for her grandmother's hand. Grandma told me the stories growing up. Mom didn't save you so you could waste your life feeling guilty. She saved you so you could live, really live, do good things, be a good person. Dorothy squeezed Sarah's hand. Your mother would have loved knowing her daughter was saved by one of her soldiers. That's not debt, that's legacy. That's what sacrifice means. It echoes forward. Duke moved closer to Sarah's bed, his nose gently touching her hand. She startled slightly, then smiled. He's the one who knew, isn't he? Your dog knew something was wrong. He always knows, William said. He's never been wrong. There's something about him, Sarah said, studying Duke's face. Something familiar, like I've known him before. A K-9 trainer named Maria Rodriguez entered the room, having heard William was there. Officer Harrison, I came as soon as I heard about what happened. I wanted to tell you something about Duke. Something I probably should have mentioned when you first got him. William turned. What is it? Duke's mother was a military canine named Echo. She served in Afghanistan. Maria paused, choosing her words carefully. She was with the unit that included Sergeant Martha Mitchell. Echo died in the same explosion that killed Sergeant Mitchell. She was trying to warn the soldiers. Barking frantically before the blast, Martha heard her, evacuated 3 men. They both died protecting those soldiers. The room fell silent. Sarah's hand moved to Duke's head, her fingers trembling. Duke was born 2 months after Echo died, Maria continued. We noticed unusual abilities in him from the start, heightened instincts beyond even exceptional canines. The breeding program studied it. Dogs can detect genetic markers, hormonal signatures, especially in family lines. We think Duke recognized something in Sarah's scent, something that connected to Martha, to the person his mother tried to save. William felt the world tilt again, reality rearranging itself into patterns almost too meaningful to be coincidence. He wasn't just detecting drugs, he was protecting Martha's daughter. Dogs have long memories, encoded in ways we don't fully understand, Maria said. Echo tried to save Martha. Duke succeeded in saving Martha's daughter. Call it genetics, call it instinct, call it whatever you want. But the connection is real. Sarah was crying now, her hand still on Duke's head. The dog leaned into her touch, his tail wagging slowly, his amber eyes gentle. He has a tag, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Number 2, and what does it mean? Dorothy gasped softly. That was Martha's call sign. 247, 24/7, always ready, always protecting. It was her motto. Maria nodded. Echo wore the same number, military tradition. We transfer the numbers from fallen canines to their offspring, honoring their memory. Duke carries his mother's legacy, just like Sarah carries hers. Agent Reynolds appeared in the doorway, respectful of the moment but needing to speak. Officer Harrison, there's more you should know about your wife's investigation. William stepped into the hallway, though part of him wanted to stay in that room where forgiveness and connection were healing wounds to 15 years old. Reynolds pulled out a file folder. Elizabeth contacted the FBI 2 years and 3 months ago. She'd seen Catherine meeting with a known trafficker, followed them, documented everything. She gave us initial evidence that started our investigation. You asked her to gather more, William said, old anger rising. She volunteered, insisted on helping despite the risks we explained. Reynolds showed him documents, Elizabeth's signature on statements declaring her participation, willing and informed. She was incredibly brave. The evidence she gathered over the 3 months was crucial, but Catherine discovered her before we could move. You let her die. We failed to protect her, Reynolds corrected quietly. There's a difference, though not one that makes it easier to bear. What Elizabeth did saved dozens of lives. The women on Flight 247, Sarah Mitchell, dozens more we've identified in Catherine's network. Your wife died fighting evil. Officer Harrison, she won. William looked at the documents, at Elizabeth's handwriting, at her determination captured in official statements. He had spent 2 years thinking of her as a victim. But she had been a warrior, choosing to fight, choosing to sacrifice for others, like Martha had, like James Walsh had, the legacy of courage passing from one to another, echoing forward through time. Sullivan approached, his expression solemn. "There's one more thing. Captain James Walsh was my commanding officer. He saved my life 3 times in Afghanistan. When Elizabeth contacted the FBI about Catherine, I volunteered for the undercover work. Took 3 years to build the case. But I owed it to Commander Walsh to stop what his widow had become, to honor his real legacy, not her twisted version of it." He showed William a photo, a younger Sullivan in uniform standing beside a man whose name tape read Walsh. The captain's face was kind, strong, the face of someone who led by example. "Commander Walsh died protecting his people," Sullivan said. "Catherine lived by destroying them. But his true legacy lives in every person he saved. You, me, Sarah. And now, because of your wife's courage and your dog's instincts, 30 more women who'll go home to their families." William looked back toward Sarah's room, where 3 generations of sacrifice and survival had come together. Martha, who saved soldiers she'd never know the full measure of. Elizabeth, who fought darkness knowing it might cost her life. Sarah, who survived because 2 people 15 years apart had chosen courage over safety. And Duke, carrying his mother's mission forward, protecting Martha's bloodline because something deeper than training or command told him to. "Some debts transcend death," William said quietly. "They're not debts," Reynolds corrected gently. "They're gifts, passed forward, person to person, generation to generation. Your job isn't to feel guilty, it's to keep passing the gift forward." William returned to Sarah's room. Dorothy and Sarah sat together, Duke lying peacefully beside the bed. 3 generations united by sacrifice and salvation. "Thank you," Sarah said simply, "for trusting your dog, for not giving up." "Thank you," William replied, "for being Martha's daughter, for reminding me what a sacrifice was supposed to mean." The weight on his chest, carried for 15 years, finally began to lift, not disappearing entirely, never that, but transforming into something bearable, something purposeful. Outside the window, the snow had stopped falling. The December sun broke through clouds, painting the world in gold and white. The darkness had been faced, the truth revealed, and in the wreckage of secrets and lies, something pure remained. Love that transcended death, courage that echoed through generations, and the simple truth that some connections, once forged, could never be broken. Not by time, not by death, not even by guilt, only by acceptance, forgiveness, and the choice to keep living in a way that honored those who had given everything. 6 months passed, and winter gave way to spring. The cemetery where Martha Mitchell was buried had transformed from snow-covered silence to fields of green dotted with flowers. The April sun warmed the earth, coaxing life from ground that had seemed frozen forever. William Harrison stood before Martha's grave, no longer alone. Sarah Mitchell stood beside him, her hand resting on Duke's head. Dorothy completed their small circle, her weathered face peaceful in the morning light. The headstone bore Martha's name, rank, and dates. Below, a new inscription had been added. Her sacrifice echoes through generations. William knelt, placing his purple heart at the base of the stone. "This belongs to you," he said quietly. "Not me," It always did. Sarah placed a photograph beside it, the image showing herself with William and Duke at the airport. "Mom, I met the man you saved. He's good. You chose right." They stood in silence, no words necessary. The connection between them ran deeper than language, forged through sacrifice and salvation, loss and redemption. Dorothy spoke finally, her voice carrying the wisdom of years. "Martha would love this. You all taking care of each other. That's what she wanted. Life continuing, not stopping, at Denver International Airport. That continuation had taken tangible form. William and Duke still walked their patrol routes, but Sarah now walked with them. She had taken a position as a volunteer victim advocate, using her experience to help other women trapped by desperation and predatory criminals. "I know what rock bottom looks like," she told each woman she counseled. "I know the lies they tell, the pressure they apply. You're not alone. There's real help available." The 30 women from Flight 247 had formed a support group that met monthly. Sarah led the meetings, creating sisterhood from shared trauma. Some carried visible scars, all carried invisible ones. But together they were healing. Catherine Walsh had been sentenced to life without parole on 30 counts of attempted murder. Plus Elizabeth Harrison's murder, justice had been served, though it brought no satisfaction, only closure. On a bench outside the terminal, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, William sat with Sarah and Dorothy. Duke's head rested on William's lap, his tail wagging contentedly. Sarah held her grandmother's hand, both women smiling at something Dorothy had said. William looked at this unexpected family, forged not by blood but by sacrifice and choice, and whispered the truth that had taken him 15 years to understand. Some families aren't born. They're saved by heroes with 4 paws and hearts bigger than fear. Duke's tail wagged harder, as though he understood and approved. The sun set, painting everything in warm light, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, William Harrison felt completely at peace. Sometimes life asks us to carry burdens we never chose, guilt for surviving when others didn't, grief for those we couldn't save, or the weight of wondering if our lives have mattered enough. William carried that weight for 15 years, until a loyal dog and a stranger's daughter showed him the truth that changes everything. Our lives are never just our own. Every act of courage, every sacrifice made by those who loved us, echoes forward in ways we cannot see. Martha saved William so he could save Sarah. Elizabeth fought evil so others could live free. Even Duke carried his mother's mission across generations. Their story reminds us that it's never too late to find purpose, to forgive ourselves, to discover family in unexpected places, and to realize that the people we've lost would want us to truly live, not merely survive. The greatest honor we can give those who sacrificed for us is to pass that gift forward, to love without condition, and to trust that our own lives matter more than we know. Have you ever felt saved by someone's sacrifice or an animal's unconditional love? What legacy do you hope to leave for those who come after you? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.